24,000 feet above Germany. Tail gunner Sergeant Robert Hayes crawls through a narrow tunnel barely wider than his shoulders. Behind him, the rest of his crew sits in the heated, pressurized cabin. Ahead of him, the tail turret. A plexiglass bubble at the very end of the aircraft. Alone. For the next 8 hours, he won't see another human face. He won't feel another person's presence. Just him, 2 machine guns, and the endless sky behind a B-17 flying fortress. If a German fighter attacks from behind, and they will, he's the only thing between that fighter and his crew's lives. If he's wounded, nobody can reach him. If his oxygen fails, he'll pass out alone. If the aircraft is hit and going down, he has to crawl back through that tunnel before the plane breaks apart. This is the tail gunner's reality. Total isolation. Total responsibility. 8 hours of it. This is how they survived. The tail gunner position on a B-17 was designed out of necessity. German fighter pilots learned that American bombers had blind spots. The most vulnerable was directly behind and below. Messerschmitt pilots would position themselves in that blind spot and fire upward into the bomber's belly and tail. Bombers were being shot down before their gunners even saw the attacking fighter. Boeing's solution was to put a dedicated gunner in the tail with a full 360-degree view to the rear and below. The tail turret could traverse side to side and elevate up and down, covering the entire rear hemisphere. Tactically, this was brilliant. Psychologically, it was a nightmare. To reach the tail position, the gunner had to crawl through a tunnel about 30 inches in diameter running through the fuselage from the waist gun area to the tail. This tunnel was maybe 15 feet long. Once you crawled through, you were in the tail turret, a cramped position barely big enough for one person, 2.50 caliber machine guns, ammunition, an oxygen bottle, and nothing else. You sat facing backward. The rest of the aircraft was in front of you, but you couldn't see it. Your crew was forward, but you couldn't see them. All you could see was the sky behind the aircraft and any fighters that appeared there. You communicated through the intercom, but that was it. For 8 to 10 hours, you sat in that plexiglass bubble at the extreme tail of the aircraft, completely alone. The physical challenges were severe. The tail turret wasn't pressurized or heated like later bomber positions. You wore an electrically heated suit, but if it failed, and they did fail, you were dealing with temperatures down to minus 60 degrees. You wore an oxygen mask connected to the aircraft system. But the oxygen line ran through that narrow tunnel. If it kinked or was damaged by flak, you had maybe 20 seconds to switch to your emergency bottle before you passed out. The tail section of the aircraft absorbed tremendous stress from the aircraft's movement. Every maneuver, every air current, every evasive action was magnified at the tail. The turret would shake and vibrate constantly. Your spine was pressed against the turret's back pad, absorbing all that vibration for hours. Tail gunners frequently reported back pain so severe they could barely walk after missions. Boeing engineers knew the tail position was the most isolated, most vulnerable position on the aircraft. They designed specific survival features into the installation. The turret itself had multiple layers of plexiglass, not for visibility, but for protection. Each layer was designed to catch and slow shrapnel. If a shell fragment came through the outer layer, the inner layers would hopefully stop it before it reached the gunner. The computing gun sight in the tail turret was more advanced than other positions. It automatically calculated lead angles based on the target's apparent movement. This wasn't luxury, it was survival. A tail gunner engaging a fighter attacking from directly behind had maybe 3 to 5 seconds to aim and fire before the fighter opened fire. There was no time for manual calculations. The computing sight gave the gunner a fighting chance to hit the target in that tiny window. The ammunition supply was critical. The tail gunner had approximately 2,500 rounds, enough for about 3 minutes of continuous fire or several shorter engagements. But here's the survival feature most people don't know about: the ammunition boxes were positioned to provide structural protection around the gunner. If flak or fighter rounds came through the tail section, they would hit the ammunition boxes before hitting the gunner. The boxes acted as improvised armor. The emergency escape procedure was the most frightening part of the position. If the aircraft was damaged and going down, the tail gunner had to crawl back through that tunnel to reach the main fuselage where the emergency exit hatches were located. But if the fuselage was broken or the tunnel was blocked by damage, the tail gunner couldn't get out. There was no emergency hatch in the tail turret. You either made it through the tunnel or you went down with the aircraft. Engineers tried to design an emergency exit in the tail turret itself. But the structural limitations made it impossible. The tail section had to be strong enough to handle the aerodynamic loads and cutting.